Good morning, everyone. Namaskar. Uh, it's quite marvelous to be in this flower garden. It's not many years old in Oroville, and I think it's taken us a long time to arrive at the idea of a garden of flowers dedicated to the mother. What is extraordinary in Mother and Sri Aurobindo is I don't think there are other spiritual teachers, guides, gurus that have given so much of importance to material manifestation, to beauty, to the joy that nature can provide. Often, spirituality has been seen as something that you step away from life and you step within, you step behind, you step above, whichever process you adopt, but you abandon this earth, this manifestation. I have not come across any teacher who, and I'm meaning both Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who gives such an extraordinary place to manifestation. So the beauty of nature is something, there is, according to Sri Aurobindo's perspective, it's an evolutionary, his yoga is an evolutionary yoga, and the argument that he offers is that the very opposition to the highest truth that we see in this world bound by death and falsehood and incapacity and suffering is the very process that nature, that material manifestation that the divine has adopted. The very opposition is the process. So, what is this process? And we will talk about that a little bit, but one of the ways in which we can find a balance in this. I can continue to speak, right? Okay? So, one of the ways in which we can find our balance in progress and movement is falling in love with beauty, falling in love with delight. And there is nothing as much as flowers that give you that. So even though my title, that's the other thing about Sri Aurobindo. He calls himself a poet. And if you wish to encounter Sri Aurobindo in the deepest sense, you have to go to his poetry. So the title of the talk I'm giving, I have taken out of a line of Savitri, which she says, all we may find when all the rest has failed, hid in ourselves the key of perfect change. So it seems that the solution has not to be found outside, it has to be found within. But what can we do to make the journey more interesting, more meaningful? And that is to fall in love with flowers. Mother, from the very beginning, was working with flowers. She's given significances. I see that perhaps there are some of you who are visitors. So she's given significances, psychological significances to all the flowers. The marigolds are plasticity. Sri Aurobindo and Mother are talking about a new world, a new plane of consciousness that needed to come down, which did come down. And the most important quality for that process of bringing that world is plasticity. So you have these marigolds, this garden is full of them right now. There is joy of work. You have the dahlias. So sometimes in Oroville, we don't know the botanical name. We do know the psychological significance. I brought along one and I thought, well, when she was working with the disciples in the ashram, she would have what was called flower discourses. And through flowers, you can discover so much. So I have brought along this flower, which has been used in India as a medium of offering. It's called champa. It's also called the temple flower. But Mother calls it psychological perfection. And if you notice, it has 5 petals. And whenever she met anyone, talking about meeting the mother, it's an interesting day for me because 54 years ago, um, my father and my mother, plus my sisters and I, we had Mother's Darshan in her room, and she gave each of us a flower. It changed all our lives. We all ended up in Pondicherry. So 22nd of February, 1972, we all sat at Mother's feet. It was beyond words. There was no word exchanged, but she gave us a flower. She used to give roses. She has a lot to say about roses. So it's a special day. Psychological perfection. She gave it the significance, and then she's talking to the children and she's saying, okay, who remembers? What are these psychological perfections? And then in that interaction, it emerges. So I'm going to share with you what she says about the 5 psychological perfections. What is so interesting about Mother is that she's never fixed. This is not final. She says, whenever I give this flower to somebody, I mean a particular set of 5. But there are many possibilities. It depends on what the person needs, what the occasion demands, what is genuinely required as a sense of progress in that moment. So she says we have to put surrender at I'll read it to you. So here is my proposal. It's a long conversation. I've just selected a little bit. So here is my proposal. We put surrender first at the top of the list. That is, we accept what Sri Aurobindo has said, that to do the integral yoga, one must first resolve to surrender entirely to the divine. There is no other way. This is the way. There is even a conversation where Sri Aurobindo is talking about surrender, or the Sanskrit word samarpan, giving yourself completely. So surrender is not keeping any least thing in yourself back. To be truly surrendered to the divine is to give 100% to the divine. But after that, one must have the 5 psychological virtues, 5 psychological perfections. And we say that these perfections are, so at the bottom of the list, or the first in the list, is sincerity. Then Mother says, you know, sometimes when I see somebody, I look at them and then I try to go within them, and then there is a kind of a wall, a sort of a doorway that closes. There is no possibility to enter, and she says, I have to push a little bit. So sincerity is not good enough by itself. It also needs to be transparent. And so a transparent sincerity, but a sincerity that's filled with this possibility to allow the divine to enter deepest into your being. Sometimes we have a tendency to hide that in us which we don't like. And how can that change if we hide it? The first process of change starts with revealing and offering. If you have a difficulty, offer it. Don't close it, don't hide it, because then the divine cannot help you also. So the first psychological perfection is transparent sincerity. That completes 1. Then she says it's absolutely essential to have faith in the divine. But often we profess a faith and then we wonder why the things that are happening to us are happening to us. We don't trust that the divine is taking us in the right direction. So the faith also requires complete trust. They're 2 slightly different things. So a trust-filled faith or a faithful trust, it's a combination. So that's psychological perfection number 2. One of the ways in which we can go through life's journey with a profundity or well-being is devotion, bhakti. And that's sometimes hard for people, particularly in Auroville, where people are here from every corner of the world. Bhakti is not always the first thing that emerges. So devotion, very important to find something one gives oneself wholehearted to. It's the heart that has wings, not the head. So devotion, but to make your devotion more complete, there is a layer that can be added, which is gratitude. Because gratitude is a movement out of your nature, out of your little being, a sense of self-giving and offering. So gratitude-filled devotion. Then she says one of the qualities which is very needed is courage. Life is going to throw all sorts of things at you. How do you meet it without courage? But courage is very much tied to aspiration. So an aspiration-filled courage, because the very burning fire, the Veda says a mystic fire must be lit in the heart, in which everything is thrown. So if you have that fire, Agni, in fact, all the verses of the Veda are addressed to Agni. Agni is Agni Mile Purohitam. Agni is the priest. Agni is the one that gives you the jewels, the precious stones, Ratnadhataram. Agni is the son of God by the body of the earth. Agni is the middle term. There are two above and there are two below. So this fire of Agni, Agni is the one that all the gods invite to go into the darkness, to go into the inconscience with the light of the psychic fire, with the flame of the psychic fire. So aspiration, a courage that's filled with aspiration, will take you through everything. And finally, because the journey is not completed in a day, there are instances where that happens, but it's not so often. So endurance. It's victory, Mother says, belongs to the most enduring. And so endurance, very, very important. But to hang on to that endurance, you need to persevere. So a persevering endurance. It ends up being 10 psychological perfections. So you have to find, each of us has to find the 5 we need at that particular moment. Tomorrow maybe you need another combination, but you have so many to select from. But the fact that our aim is to arrive at psychological perfection is given. Mother says one form of endurance is faithfulness. Faithfulness to one's resolution, being faithful. This is endurance. There you are. If one persists, there comes a time when one is victorious. Victory is to the most persistent. So this is a conversation in January 1956 when she's talking to the kids. There are wonderful things. It's like in Mother, Sri Aurobindo has a library of books, and what is so extraordinary is that he has argued in the most cogent and coherent manner why it is inevitable that the aim of this earthly manifestation is a life divine in the body, in life, in manifestation. And you have a choice of books. If you are interested in the why of it, you go to the Life Divine. If you're interested in the how of it, you go to the Synthesis. There are so many analyses, surveys he's done of ancient Indian thought. There are 2 books on the Upanishad, 2 on the Veda. There are his extraordinary essays on the Gita. There are 3 books about, when I was a 16-year-old when I came across Sri Aurobindo, and I found that his commentary on the social political situation, I come from an armed forces background, so I was always very interested in India's security. I never came across a spiritual teacher who comments about these issues, which look like they are secular issues, they don't concern the spirit. But Sri Aurobindo has such extraordinary, insightful comments about that. So there are 3 books on social political thought: The Human Cycle, The Ideal of Human Unity, and War and Self-Determination. We should visit war and self-determination. We have wars in every continent, and Sri Aurobindo has something to say about that. So he's not just, he's a dreamer, yes, and there are his 5 dreams that we are trying to bring down into manifestation. But he talks about his dreams and he says he's trying to bring them into manifestation. If you want to encounter him in his totality, you have to go to Savitri. Because in Savitri, he gives you the experience of his yoga. So to go back to the title of this particular talk, I said the key to perfect change, the key of perfect change is inside ourselves. If you look at Savitri, there are so many references to that which exists at the bottom of manifestation, the inconscience. There are at least about 110 references to the inconscience. So yes, the key is hid inside ourselves, but it is kept. So here is another line from Savitri. For the key is hid and by the inconscient kept. The secret God beneath the threshold dwells. In the Veda, there is a very mysterious reference to something called the 8th sun, Martanda. And that is the sun that is at the bottom, in the deepest darkness. If Sri Aurobindo's yoga is aimed at something, it is aimed at bringing light into the inconscience. So this is a yoga where you have to transform yourself. It's a yoga of transformation. So you have to change your nature. It's a yoga aimed at life. Mother says about Auroville, life itself, I'm quoting, life itself, growing and perfecting itself, each one in their own way. There is a letter of Sri Aurobindo where he says, how can I give a program, a prescription? How do you lift a consciousness that is human in manifestation? How you cannot put a pulley and pull him up or her up into the superconscious. Each one must find their own way. So he says, here is what I have discovered. Here is what worked for me. Now you figure out how it's going to work for you. But the process is the same. You lift your consciousness, you try to change your nature, and the moment you do, that becomes a power by which you go down. The number of references. So there is another point where he says, it's a little bit, shouldn't make us worried, but for the inconscient too is infinite. The more its abysses we seek to sound, the more it stretches endlessly. So what is he saying? We have to go into the inconscious, but it's kind of endless. The fact is, Sri Aurobindo accepts the Vedantic worldview of a sevenfold world. There is the upper hemisphere of Sat Chit Ananda, and then there is the lower hemisphere, the hemisphere of Avidya, which is matter, life, and mind. Matter, life, and mind has evolved from, did not have an instrument by which they could step out and observe themselves. So imagine in the primeval forest, there is a great ape and it has a thought, but it hasn't yet developed the capacity to know that it is thinking. So at what point did the apes evolve into Homo sapiens? We have no observing instrument. But today, with human consciousness, we have the power to step out of ourselves and observe ourselves and analyze who we are. And with this capacity for analysis, we can accelerate progress. We have evolved all kinds of systems. One of the most fabulous systems that India has cherished and nurtured for millennia is the system which is called yoga. Unfortunately, it is often understood today as being a system of physical exercises. It is not. It is one of the ways when you take, so every yoga system has an instrument, and depending on the instrument it has a process, and depending on the instrument and the process, you have a consequence, a result. So, Hatha Yoga, the instrument of Hatha Yoga is the body and the breath. And using the body and breath takes you somewhere. The aim of all yogas is union with the source of manifestation, either transcendent or in manifestation or universal. But the Bhagavad Gita gives us this fabulous trimarga, the path of knowledge, jnana yoga, the path of devotion, bhakti yoga, and the path of um, karma yoga, the path that is Auroville's path, action, doing. So Sri Aurobindo, in the synthesis of yoga, takes all of these yoga systems, and what he offers us, he calls an integral yoga. But all yoga systems up to Sri Aurobindo's, the aim of those yoga systems was stepping out, either behind or above. Nobody up to Sri Aurobindo has ever argued. No, it is argued in the Veda and the Upanishad, but in a manner that is secret. The Veda says secret words that reveal themselves only to those who know. So there is a kind of a lost secret of the Veda. The Upanishad is somewhat understandable, but it's intuitive. There is no process yet derived from it. So what Sri Aurobindo offers us is a process, a systematized, organized process. He calls his yoga integral yoga, but it's not a juxtaposition of this plus this plus this. It's a whole reversal of approach where the integrality is to do with your nature. You have to harness all the parts of your being. You cannot neglect any part, because finally the aim is transmutation, transformation, and transmutation takes place below, not above. We are all divine. The Upanishad tells us, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahmanasti. Everything is already that. But we live in the very part of us that doesn't have that sense. So, how can we switch from that part that sees itself as separate and individual to the part that can be capable of universality, of oneness? The aim of Aurobindo is that universality and that oneness. I had said I'd speak for about a little more than half an hour, and then I wanted to open it out to questions. So, what I'm arguing is that there is something unique in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and his whole life was spent in trying to bring the fourth plane, what the Veda calls the Turiyam Swith, the fourth one, because it's four from below and four from above. So you have Sat Chit Ananda, which is the plane of Vidya, the plane of the divine. And then you have matter, life, and mind, which is the plane of avidya, ignorance. And the line that divides these two planes is Vijnana, which Sri Aurobindo has given the name supermind. Sri Aurobindo's whole yoga is aimed at this fourth plane. In the Veda, it is said that the Upanishad and the Veda both speak about this is the sun world. And there is a kind of a golden lid which separates this sun world from the plane of ignorance, the plane we live in. Now, how do you penetrate this world? The Veda seems to suggest that if you cross this gate, you can't retain a body. You have to abandon a body. So Sri Aurobindo's whole concern is it possible to bring this plane, the plane of the supermind, into manifestation? Now, what we understand, because we have no experience of this, we have to have the faith that what we have been told is that something came down. And that something, this plane, the plane of the supermind, the plane of Vijnana, came down into manifestation 6 years after Sri Aurobindo left his body, because he couldn't do it while he was in the body. He could do it in his own body, but he couldn't do it for the manifestation. I'm saying many things which perhaps you all will have to explore further, or if you want to ask me later, I can elaborate it. But just to understand, this yoga of transformation harnesses the power of this plane which came into manifestation, and everything that follows, including the birth of Auroville, because it's very, very important that Auroville exists. I will read you something where Mother says, where she talks about the model town. She said, we have this idea in India, this is for many of the non-Indians, we have this idea that the divine takes a body to help the process of evolution forward. And that taking of the body, or that manifestation of the full divine consciousness in a human body, is called avatar. So we have both avatars and vibhutis. These are energies and forces that inhabit a human body to accelerate evolution. So Mother is speaking about the avatar. The avatar, even if he was shut up in a prison and saw nobody and never moved out, still would he do the work, because it is a work in the consciousness, a work of connection between the supermind and the material being. He does not need to be recognized. He need have no outward power in order to be able to establish this conscious connection. So if we assume that Mother and Sri Aurobindo did that connection, what follows? Once, however, the connection is made, it must have its effect in the outward field in the form of a new creation, beginning with a model town and ending with a perfect world. So in some ways, this experiment, which is a difficult experiment, it's an impossible experiment, it cannot be created by human consciousness. The mental consciousness is too divided, too self-centered, too selfish to create this. And yet, isn't it quite miraculous that Auroville is now 58 years old? And in spite of all the Aurovillians, we've learned to work together somehow and build it. When we work together, we create beauty. And that's the key to Auroville, to work together, to be united. Because that's how we create the new world. You need a critical mass. The work of consciousness, at least for us, we have the faith that it has been done. Now the work of manifestation requires a sufficiently large number of human individuals that put their bodies in the way, arrive at psychological perfection, give themselves fully to this work, and then somehow we would bring this light to be sufficiently visible in the inconscious. Because this is the issue. We have a sense of individuality. Actually, it's our ego that gives us the sense of individuality. So Sri Aurobindo says ego is the helper. It helps you to make yourself, to separate yourself from the mass of manifestation. We are just atoms and molecules. What holds us together? It's the sense of the ego. But the moment you turn to the yoga and you have sufficiently individualized, ego becomes the problem. So Sri Aurobindo says ego is the helper, ego is the bar. So we are at that stage in Auroville where somehow we have to find a way, and nobody can make us do it, it has to come from within outwards, that we subsume our individual egos into a collective realization. So Auroville is a fraternity of collaboration. And how do you create fraternity? You cannot create it by social or political devices. Fraternity emerges from a soul opening. Brotherhood, the third great principle of the French Revolution. We've tried experiments in liberty. Humanity has tried experiments in liberty, experiments in equality. Doesn't take us very far. You push one, you lose the other. The only experiment we have not tried is the experiment of a fraternity, of collaboration, of brotherhood, of finding a way to be together in unity, in harmony. So we were talking about courage in the psychological perfections. The very last conversation Mother has with a group of Aurovilians in 1973, she says, "You do not understand what heroism means. Heroism is to be united." And she's speaking to people who were organizing Auroville at that time, because the problems had already started there. There was a sense of division even while she was in her body. People found it so hard to work together because people had their point of view. So one of the issues we are facing, even though we've managed in spite of ourselves to build this to the point, I've been here 50 years, and the line that out of Savitri stays with me the most is all's miracle here and can by miracle change. It is a miraculous manifestation, because how out of atoms and molecules have we been created? How can I be sitting in front of you and talking, hopefully intelligibly? Where has this possibility emerged? Because we are just atoms and molecules whirling around. Where has human thought emerged? Why is human thought so limited? So we talk about human thought emerging, and then we say, oh, it's so limited. It has to go beyond itself. So we're at that cusp, that evolutionary crisis where something else is needed. And Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. Then he says, in our body's cells there sits a hidden power that sees the unseen and plans eternity. One of it has been published after Mother and Sri Aurobindo both left their bodies. The archives and research in the ashram began to go through all the material that was there. And what has emerged, which you will find in what are called the collected works of Sri Aurobindo, are 2 volumes called The Record on Yoga, which was a process that Sri Aurobindo was practicing upon himself. He refers to it in different books. In the Synthesis of Yoga, we come across quite a few references to what he calls the Sapta Chatushtaya, meaning the 7 fours. But I have a text from the Record on Yoga, which he writes, to become one with God, to be divine and live a divine life is the first object of yoga. This is a program he's setting for himself. And we who have come to his feet, that's our program too. The second is to know God in himself and in ourselves and in everything. To make ourselves one with the divine will and do in our life a divine work by means of the divine power using us as an instrument. So it's not we who can do it. We have to offer ourselves, samarpan, giving ourselves completely to the divine energy that will then use us in the right way. So we're at that cusp of change where it's so hard to give ourselves. Because the aim is, it works, this energy, this divine power, it works to find the doer of all works. And there are 2 aspects to that. The unfelt self within, who is the guide. That's the psychic being. The power that energizes our life and action in Auroville. That's kind of the first step for anyone who signs up for Auroville. To find the unself unfelt self within who is the guide. Next step is the unknown self above who is the goal. As I said, in Savitri, you get all the answers, but you get it in a descriptive manner, not in a prescriptive manner. For someone like myself who likes to make my own choices, Savitri is perfect because she gives you everything you need to make your program of action. So I recommend, if you want to encounter Sri Aurobindo, read his Savitri. Savitri says at one point, I cherish God the fire. She's speaking to death, and not God the dream. If this fire is awake in your hearts, it can change everything you do, because its absence left the greatest actions dull. Its presence made the smallest seem divine. So it's a question of hanging on at all cost to this presence. Because if you have that presence within you, even the smallest thing you do is full of this divinity that is at the core of matter. Mother says the divine we seek is not far away and beyond reach. The divine is the very self within you, the unknown self and the hidden self within. I wanted to just, because we are in the flower garden, they are delightful conversations through all of Mother's books about her interaction with the material world, with the vegetable world, with the flowers and plants. There's a moment in her life where she's receiving flowers, massive amounts of flowers, and she has a notebook in which she's writing down the numbers. So the number of plasticity, the number of skill in works, the number of aspiration, the number of Radha's consciousness, whatever she got. So she would make a list and she would count the number of flowers, because she had an arrangement with material nature that the number of flowers she actually counted, and if she gave it to somebody, she gave along with that flower the power to change that possibility in their nature. So let's say if she gave you the flower she calls transformation, which she calls perfect, then it gave you the power to transform something in yourself if you use that energy, because she gave that energy to you. But the power that is the most mysterious of the divine, but it has been least active in manifestation, is the power of love. And so I'm reading you a conversation that she has, it's in 53, I think, and she's talking about love and in plants. The unselfish movement, uncalculating, is one of the most beautiful forms of psychic consciousness in the world. But the higher one rises in the scale of mental activity, the rarer it becomes, because the mind is a divinity and it interferes. It has something. Sri Aurobindo says it's a mediator divinity, but it has a dark side. For with intelligence comes all the skill and cleverness and corruption and calculation. For instance, when a rose blossoms, it does so spontaneously, for the joy of being beautiful, smelling sweet, expressing all its joy of living, and it does not calculate. It has nothing to gain out of it. It does so spontaneously in the joy of being and living. Take a human being. Well, apart from a very few exceptions, the moment his mind is active, he tries to get some advantage out of his beauty and cleverness. He wants it to bring him something, either men's admiration or even much more sordid gains yet. Consequently, from the psychic point of view, the rose is better than human beings. I think that's a good little slap for us. And there is a lovely piece in The Life Divine where he says that in terms of relationship, the ant is more powerful than the cosmos. So you have to figure this out. What does he mean by that? But that's so incredible. Because the divine spends equal energy, complete energy, in creating the ant and the anthill as the divine does in creating the cosmos. There is no half measure in the divine's action. So, this is something we have to pay attention to. The divine acts absolutely in, well, there's a poem of Shabando that the hand that sent Jupiter swinging through heaven spends all its energy fashioning a curl. So the divine is complete in every action. So somebody asked the mother, do flowers love? This is their form of love, their blossoming. Certainly, when one sees a rose opening to the sun, it is like a need to give its beauty. Only for us, it's almost unintelligible, for they do not think about what they do. A human being always associates with everything he does this ability to see himself doing it. That is, to think about himself. Man knows that he is doing something. Animals don't think. It is not at all the same form of love. And flowers, so to speak, are not conscious. It is a spontaneous movement, not a consciousness that is conscious of itself. So that's a key. The flower just is. It knows how to be. We observe ourselves. It's our strength as well as our weakness. But it is a great force which acts through all that. The great universal consciousness and the great force of universal love. Two things. You know that when Mother began to speak about Auroville in 1965, she begins to describe the center of Auroville. Nothing is there, not even the place is there. The place has still to be found, this place. And she describes the center, and she calls this center the pavilion of love. And then she says, no, because human beings don't understand love. They have made something of love so sordid and so uninteresting. So she calls it Matri Mandir, because that too is a manifestation of love. The Universal Mother is love in manifestation. So today we have this incredible symbol, which is more complete than anywhere else on earth, an invocation to the power that manifests the universe. The second thing I want to say, because I like to bring the two sides, there is a moment in manifestation. Think of the Big Bang. What was there before the Big Bang? Science says it's a singularity. So there is kind of nothing, and then out of nothing, this universe bodies forth in a Big Bang. Science calls it a singularity. But for geological aeons, this planet that we call the Earth was a little bit grey. There was not much color in it. And then at a certain point in time, just by itself, spontaneously, color burst forth. How did it? The flowers, which are scientifically called angiosperms. So at some point in time, material nature accelerates by creating flowers. And suddenly, we have a world of color. So you could study this scientifically too. At what point in manifestation does color burst forth? So we have the grace to live in a world filled with color. One last thing, and then it'll be 45 minutes and I will stop. As usual, I have lots of stuff that I can share with you. Just behind you, there is Radha's consciousness. I want to show everybody Radha's consciousness. Poonam, will you show everybody? This. So this flower, this wonderful...
Take a flower, Miss.
You can lift one up. Ek utha do.
Blue purple.
Yes. So this is the flower Mother calls Radha's consciousness. And you know that when she's speaking about this flower, by the way, it makes a lovely juice also.
Tea also.
Huh?
Tea also.
Tea also. So it's In India, Mother says that in India there is a symbol of the psychic being, and that symbol is Radha. Because Radha is a consciousness, she's connected to Krishna. If you go to Vrindavan, you don't say Krishna, you say Radhe Shyam.
Yeah.
You know, like you say Sita Ram, the energy is spoken of first, the Shakti is. So Radhe Shyam in Vrindavan, where Sri Krishna is supposed to have been. So Radha's consciousness, and she's trying to tell people what is the psychic being. And so she has written this delightful, one of my favorite pieces, a prayer,
Yeah.
Radha's prayer. So I will conclude with Radha's prayer, which is your psychic being. And if you can touch this truth, you have touched your psychic being. So how do you touch your psychic being? Through psychological perfection. There's a moment in the ashram where Mother puts together a bunch of flowers and she asks the disciples, make a sentence. So you can do that. Every morning you wake up, you take a set of sentence flowers and you make a sentence using their psychological significances. So may I have the plasticity of consciousness that gives birth to psychological perfection that leads to Radha's consciousness. For instance, Radha's prayer. O thou, whom at first sight I knew for the Lord of my being and my God, receive my offering. Thine are all my thoughts, all my emotions, all the sentiments of my heart, all my sensations, all the movements of my life, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood. I am absolutely and altogether thine, thine without reserve. What thou wilt of me, that I shall be. Whether thou choosest for me life or death, happiness or sorrow, pleasure or suffering, all that comes to me from thee will be welcome. Each one of thy gifts will be always for me a gift divine, bringing with it the supreme felicity. Mother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the prayer of each of our psychic beings, the prayer to the source of the universe to make us one with that.
Mm.
So I will stop here and I'll be delighted if you have any questions or not. It's okay.
The name of this wind chain is also Radha Mohan, the one you are hearing. With Mohan is another name of Krishna. Mohan is another name of Krishna.
Yes, so what Poonam is saying is the wind chimes you are hearing outside, they're called Radha Mohan, which means Radha and Krishna. Mohan is one of the names. In India, we have hundreds of names for each of the manifest godheads because it's all their different personalities. So depending on which personality you're contacting, you use that name.
You were telling us something about within the cell.
I-
You mentioned in the at the cellular level to see the unseen, and that would mean with the light. That's what you're talking about. I'm okay. Audible?
Can't hear you.
the question was about the cellular level. How do the cells see?
Yeah, in the sentence was see the unseen.
Yes, I think that's a bit rocket science right now for our state of consciousness, but that is the aim. Mother has an interesting remark. She says, talk to yourselves. If there is a dis-ease, which disease means a sense of unease in the body, well, have a conversation with your body. We tend to treat this, which is this incredible machine that we inhabit, we tend to disregard it and treat it unconsciously. can we develop a conscious relationship? But the cellular yoga is a little bit beyond us right now. But it is the final aim, that where even the cells can change.
So it's the unseen that creates the dis-ease.
No, I think it is. Look, I should not speak about things that are mysterious. I would say you should study a little more what Sri Aurobindo and Mother have to say about this question and discover your own insights from it,
Okay.
because we are still at the level of a psychic transformation. Then once that is done, then we arrive at the universality. The last message that Mother gives to manifestation, that's 1973, is when you are conscious of the whole world at the same time, then you can become conscious of the divine. So Sri Aurobindo speaks about a triple transformation. The first transformation, which is I think where Auroville is at, where most of humanity is at, is the psychic transformation, where the psychic comes forward and takes charge of mind, life, and body. Any action you take, any thought you have, is guided by the psychic. I'm not sure we are very much as a species at that stage, as we can see in the world, but even in the world of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, it's not so achieved. Once that is achieved, then you have to universalize. When you become conscious of the whole world at the same time. That's the universal transformation. That is achieved by a few great people we put on a pedestal, saints and mystics. Only then begins the supramental yoga, which is the one you're asking about. So that's stage 3. Now, there could be some sort of a simultaneous action. There could be. But if it is taking place, it's not taking place through our conscious awareness. Because the supramental is such an energy and a force that it can only act unconscious of the ego. So there should be no ego present. Because, as Sri Aurobindo said, the ego takes everything. So this is not something, it's not something the ego can touch. So the universalization is when the ego disappears. So there, if you want to have a sense of what that would mean, in Book 7, Canto 7, there is a canto that Sri Aurobindo calls the Cosmic Spirit. And in that, at the end of it, Savitri becomes everything. So she's the flower, the tree, the plants, the nature. Because what holds us together? It's our sense of ego. If you remove the physical ego, what holds the body together? It's atoms and molecules, just like this table is. How do we create that sense of separation? As I said, it's rocket science. I'll just answer that. It's rocket science. It's not something that you and I can understand, but we have a kind of a transcript that our brain can hold.
Yeah, and also the paradox is that it has to be understood in the physical structure.
Yes. So I have a feeling the Buddha had a good solution to that. He says, does that concern you right now? He doesn't comment on first cause, source. He says, do the Eightfold Path. That's going to help you arrive at a state of consciousness which can interact with that. And I think that's true of us. Practice limitation. What is the extent of consciously, honestly, with integrity, what are your limits?
I think that's a good point.
And it's just speculative. Sri Aurobindo and Mother are not into speculative philosophy. But they have written everything, so it's there. But the danger is we read it and we begin to think. I remember when the agenda was coming out and the cellular yoga was being spoken about, I remember a whole bunch of Aurovillians thinking they were doing the cellular yoga. Not okay. You're nowhere there. First, work on your ego. First, work on yourself. Be in a state where you have the right to speak about. So I'm sorry, I'm speaking about things that I don't have the right to speak about. So please recognize the limitation I'm putting in front. Yeah?
Thank you.
Yes.
About the unseen, I've got two things to say. One about the unseen that the woman said. I don't like using the microphone. Can you not hear me?
Yes.
One about the unseen, I always feel that that's the part of ourselves that we've buried under unconsciously buried, like a blind spot. And that to become aware consciously of ourselves in that unseen part of ourselves that we haven't seen, that we've forgotten, we've buried. That's how I see that. That's one thing. And the other thing I was going to say was that it's so inspiring to hear you talk, Dipti, that I wish we could have this kind of talk every week. Because I really, no, maybe not, I mean, I don't want to take your time, but I think it would really bring people together if we could talk like this, you know, in this depth, like this every week. I think it would really help Oroville to find its purpose again.
If it was that easy. No. No, but you know, when you talk, you give the impression you know more than you know.
No, but
And we are all a little bit
I know that.
groping in the dark. But there's something interesting that Mother says, which might, she says that we have to accept to be part of the darkness, to offer it to the light. So if you want to transform something, transformation is a different kettle of fish to yogic self-development. You complete your development and then you come back and you start to transform. If you want to transform something, you have to accept to be part of it. If someone does something monstrous somewhere in the world, that's you. No, not you, that's you. Meaning,
Oh, yeah.
as long as you carry the human substance, you carry the inconscient that expresses itself in the human substance in you. So the only way to change that outside is to change it inside. So Mother says the world is perfectly organized. The field of work is inside yourself. You come on earth with everything that you have to do inside you. And if you can change you, you've done what you needed to do for the world. So world change is not possible in this yoga. There are many people in the world who are trying to change the world. They haven't, unfortunately, succeeded very
It
well.
would be very true. Be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, and the change is inside
Be the
in your
change.
consciousness. Often we react to things outside which we carry in ourselves. So Mother says she's very demanding. She says that you react to something, it's because there's a familiarity in you. A guru, a yogi, a teacher embraces, doesn't judge. As long as we carry judgment in ourselves, we are not where we are supposed to be. There is, if you go to Mother's room, as you step out of her room, there is this big board. I don't know how many of you noticed it sideways. Are you telling the Creator what to do?
Yes.
Who are we? We are little creatures. No? So be busy
And yet
with
the
yourself.
grandest expression.
Huh?
And yet the grandest expression of creation.
As the ant is.
Yes. Everything.
Everything is the divine. Sarvam khalvidam brahmanasti. So if you can hang on to that how can the divine judge the divine? I mean, but the mind is very useful. So don't throw the mind away. Use it
That's
in the
assuring.
right way. Use it in the right way. Use it to work on yourself.
And add to it, she has a class every week, Tuesdays.
I know, I go to
So
it.
this is a
I do
yoga.
go
So
to it on
you can
Tuesdays.
have that
It's okay.
part of what you
Yes. It's
vegetate.
just that, you know,
You know, talking heads, it's very easy to become a talking head when
discussion
it's
helps.
very good to keep busy with yourself.
Your talks, when you speak, it's like it opens up certain thought processes within, and that's what is. And the work is there, of course. Then there is work to do that, but the ideas conveyed is so clear, and there is also backed up with your energy. And
After 50 years, I feel, oh my God, I've just put my foot on the step of this great yoga that Shri Aurobindo has offered.
so that's what I receive. to do the work there. Thank you.
Should we? It's 1 hour. Ravi, Punam, what should we do?
Somebody maybe more questions.
Let's say last one question.
Yeah.
Not for me, I'm suggesting. And one thing, it said there are a lot of color flowers here in our park, and the visible world, but was in the garden also. In the underwater also, there are a lot of color. How does it help also in this yoga operation?
I haven't understood.
The flower is a lot of colors, it is offering by nature.
Yes.
So in the same way also, in the underwater, you see a lot of colors and even more
Absolutely.
color. So how
You
it
know,
help also?
one of the most magical things is color everywhere. And the fantasy, the nature and her fantasy. You will say it's not possible that nature has created such a creature, but sure, that creature is there. You look at the fish in the ocean, you look at the birds in the sky. There is the magic of the psychic self expression. But the difference between all these manifestations and the human being is the human being is an evolutionary being. The tiger is a type. So the tiger is more divine than the human being because the tiger cannot evolve beyond tigerness. But the human being has 1 foot in the world of darkness and 1 foot in the divine world. It's just that we have to lift that foot off the darkness and step into the other world. So our greatest strength is that we can evolve consciously. But the birds, the flowers, they're there to lift our spirits and make us feel the psychic pulsation of love in the world. So we should love the world. Yes.
Excuse me. I have a question out of what you said. How comes that then the human transformed, from the ape, the ape transformed to human, if the tiger cannot transform itself? How comes?
No, when I say the tiger doesn't evolve beyond tigerness,
Yes.
it would have to become another creature. But if you look at a tiger, we have studied tigers and we discover as a species that an alpha male tiger needs 14 square kilometers and will kill anything of his type to be able to maintain his rule. You can't tell a tiger, can you adjust to 8 square kilometers? Even though his survival on earth is dependent on that adjustment. So we may in the future not have manifest tigers on earth unless as a species we change our attitude to the way we take care of manifestation. What I'm saying is the tiger cannot become a super tiger.
But
If you understand.
But the ape became a.
But it stopped being an ape then. It became something else. So the human being has to stop being a human being and become something else, a next step. But we have the power to recognize that we can step beyond ourselves. We have great dreams. So Shakespeare has Hamlet say, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself the king of infinite space were not for the fact that I have bad dreams. So human beings are capable of dreaming. Perhaps the ape was dreaming also, but it was not self-aware in its dream. I don't know if I'm just saying that there is evolutionary nature has final, like the flower doesn't think, it gives. So in some ways, in an evolutionary process, we are ahead of the flower, ahead of the tiger, but not in their divinity. The divinity is complete here.
As a flower.
As a flower. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's our strength and our weakness.
Yes.
Along these lines, I think most of us would have.
Or do you want to ask more questions?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Along these lines, I think most of us would have watched Jane Goodall's documentary on the Netflix, And in just the beginning of the documentary, that's got my attention the most is one of the chimps. They are a group of people, and he's just on a box, and then he just turns around and he gives a hug to Jane.
The power of love is everywhere in manifestation.
And it was really moving because it was almost with an intent, such a beautiful intent.
Absolutely. Listen, there is no inferiority. I'm talking about evolution.
Yeah, in these lines, it almost felt like that particular.
There was an evolutionary
Evolution.
moment. Yeah. But animals that are around human beings develop cunning, greed. It's not their normal nature. They've evolved. They've learned from us. It's easier to learn bad qualities. It's harder to learn good qualities. That's something about human nature.
But
Poonam.
this, oh sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, you have mentioned something in very inspiring talk you are giving today, a sort of a key. When you say it, and it is true that we Aurobindo, or those who are the disciples of Mother and Aurobindo, have read and studied, and you say that one time that the manifestation is sort of a difficulty. And Aurobindo has gone through several turmoil. Can you develop this idea that how can we move forward and why we have not reached that critical mass in spite of so much effort from everybody?
It's very hard. It's how can you ask me to see
but
what the divine intention
it's a
is?
key here when you say the manifestation.
Yeah, so I was quoting from a line from Savitri because he says the key is hid and it's inside ourselves. It's the key to perfect change is within ourselves. So it's an individual evolution that does have to take place. But the magic of Auroville that I live in, and I live in it, I don't think it. Because when I think it, I say, oh my God. But I live in it, is that in spite of everything, it keeps growing. But of course, with a little bit of acrimony and tension and lack of togetherness. But I have seen when we truly subsume our egos and we work together, it's magical. The magic is right there. I remember, so this is an anecdote, please. You're asking me to find a measure. So it was in 1985, and we were in a very, very difficult phase in Auroville. It looked like it could not continue. There was so much of difficulty. The ownership key is the problem. The problem of ownership. It's there in the first point of Auroville's charter. Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. It's the lot of humanity that we are dealing with. How to deal with the problem of ownership. Mother raises that topic even to be a true Aurovillian. She says, at last a place where we can get over this sense of ownership, but we all have that sense of ownership. It's not out of any of our consciousness, so how can we take it out of the collective consciousness? And then nowhere on earth is a land that belongs to nobody. So we were going through this difficult phase, and somehow I had the idea. Those days, the United Nations international years were very, very important. Today, the United Nations is kind of needing to evolve. It's sinking. That time it was still very powerful. And in 1985, they had the International Year of Youth. And I said, Auroville, it's the place where the youth of the world have to come. We were about 300 Aurovillian adults and maybe 150 kids. So we were less than 500. And Kiran Bhai was Secretary Education in Delhi. And I said to him, and he says, yes, India will host the first seminar. So somehow this little idea got taken up by a kind of a world energy, and Auroville became, thanks to the government, and because I had proposed the idea, I was coordinating. And we hosted the first International Youth Year Seminar in Auroville. We were a couple of hundred adults, and we got 250 people from around the world. This was at the time when the Soviet Union, the Iron Curtain was very strong, 85. It collapses in 89, but in 85 it's very strongly present. So we had people flying in from Russia, from Romania, from Mongolia, from Brazil, from Bulgaria. I mean, like, all of us we were mostly Europeans and Indians. There was maybe one or two people from Africa, very few people from South America. So there were parts of the world that were not represented, and certainly nobody from the Soviet Union. The Russians and all the people from the Eastern Europe came post 1990. In about 92, 93, people began to come. So we had all the aspiration in the world, but we were not representative of everybody. So for 1 week, we had to put these 250 people in people's houses. So we had a housing group that was purchasing mattresses, bed sheets, towels. We had someone managing the transport. We had someone manning the reception. Everybody, including the kids, everybody put aside all their points of view and they worked together. I still recall the magic of the moment when we Aurovilians all worked together. And I don't have the key in how to make people work together, because you cannot tell them to work together. The government cannot tell us to work together. It's not going to work. It has to be something that comes from us, where somehow we find a way to work together. And it was magical. So I was supposed to be the coordinator. I had no work. And so I would go to the kitchen. You know what is Kala Kendra now? We were feeding 300 people every day, breakfast, lunch and dinner. So there was a group of young Aurovilians managing the kitchen. They were there, they slept there. For 10 days they cooked, they slept. Somebody was purchasing the food. Somehow we developed a capacity that I did not know we had. And we did it all together for 10 days only. But for me, that became the standard. That when Aurovilians work together, a magic takes place that is beyond anyone's comprehension. So the key for me is to work together. But you cannot make it happen. It has to happen. I don't know, I mean, that's a personal anecdote, but still. So I lived that experience and I don't want anything less than that.
So different topic. I mean, what I wanted to ask is what. Okay. So in Indian scriptures, what I have heard from childhood, that in after 36 million of births, you get this human birth. This is what was taught to us from the childhood. Okay, so human being, I feel that I am human being. But as a kid, I always felt in nature that nature has something very higher, and every creature has something very beautiful in it, because created by the divine. And I wanted to be a bird. And the reason was that the bird can fly, and we human beings, and I used to see dreams then, because it was my wish to be a bird, and I used to see dreams that I'm flying above. And until now, I see those dreams that even I'm flying above or over. So I found a bird was better than
Human being.
you can say something, because why can't we fly? I mean,
Because
the
you
bird
do, but
bird
not in.
can fly.
No, okay, you do. When you go out of your body, because we all go out of our bodies, we have many layers that we live in, but we haven't yet conquered that in our bodies. But if you look, it's the most ancient dream of humanity, flying. And it took many, many centuries for us to achieve that. But we needed some sort of a machine to do that in. But now sometimes when I see these people with this kind of material where they, and then they dive off buildings and they're kind of flying and all that, it's coming closer. I mean, if you think of it, I think it's hold fast to dreams. This is Langston Hughes, an American poet, a black American poet, who says, because if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. So you have to hold fast to the dream, but you have to recognize that the laws of matter, until we find a process by which we can change those laws, and science, modern science, Sri Aurobindo celebrates modern science. In fact, he says in The Life Divine that the materialist denial is less dangerous for the future than the ascetic's rejection. Because in the ascetic rejection, which is what all yoga has been up to now, all the religions, all the yoga systems have seen a solution with abandoning the body. And he says, but that there is no future in that. You abandon earth. The scientific materialist denial is okay because they will push beyond us. If they are true to themselves, they have to go beyond. And so if you look at the discoveries, the scientific discoveries, it's a matter of time before we figure out a process by which we can, I don't know, walk through walls. I'm joking. No, but I'm just saying what's wrong with holding the dream. So hang on to your dream about flying.
Thank you, thank you.
Don't let go. But it may be not in this body. It may be in another. But we all fly. Because when we sleep, Sri Aurobindo talks about he takes all these ideas from traditional Indian thought, and this material world, Virat, is only one of the worlds we live in. There is Hiranyagarbha, there is Prajna, there is Sushupti, there are the deepest dream. In Savitri, he describes these planes. So Sri Aurobindo doesn't abandon all these ideas, but he is insisting on the process. You cannot speak about something that you do not control the process of. I mean, I'm speaking about things I don't have the process of, so please excuse me. I'm only making you be aware of the dream, but unless we develop the scientific process, we haven't got it. When I came to Auroville, we had no telephones. The only way you could communicate was get on a motorcycle and go and see the person. Today, you have these tiny little machines that you can speak to anyone, anywhere in the world. I mean, there were no satellites in those days. Just in 50 years, look at the change. But it's all tied to outward things. Have we achieved the same inner change? If we do, it's magic.
And what about the after 32 millions of births? Can you speak something about
Okay. See, I don't know enough about that, but I have a feeling that the idea is what it's suggesting is, because there are religious traditions, including Buddhism, that seems to speak about going forward and then going back. That you're born as a human and then you can be born as an animal. Sri Aurobindo doesn't relate to that very much.
No, I mean what we heard that you take 32 millions of birds and then you get human birds, and that is the human birth is very very precious.
Okay, so, but I'm saying different traditions may say different things.
That one,
But the
they
whole
were not
idea
saying
is
to us.
that there is something, and that's recognized, there is something very special about this human body. If you look at the Sistine Chapel, you have God, who's just like an old, very muscular character, who's doing this, and then there is Adam, and there is a kind of electricity that's passing between Adam and God, and that's life. So, but what does that image suggest? That we are made in God's image. That's what it suggests. So the human birth is godlike. And in Indian stories also, the gods in the Vedic age, they say, at last, here is a body, here is a form that we are ready to manifest in. And then the Indian idea is also that if the gods want to evolve, the gods are title beings, they're immortal. But if they wish to evolve, they have to take a body. So the human body has in it the psychic, which is unique to manifestation. So, of course, it's special to be in a human body. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we should stop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.